She thought she was just another wife, trapped in a golden cage, controlled, humiliated, powerless. But when her arrogant husband mocked her in front of hundreds, she decided to show him the one thing he could never control, a secret worth $1.8 billion. What begins as betrayal becomes a war of money, power, and justice. This is the Bitcoin betrayal, where revenge isn't loud. It's calculated. And the twist? You won't see it coming. Stay to the end. The ending will blow your mind. And if you love stories of revenge, power, and poetic justice, hit like, drop a comment, share it with your friends, and subscribe, because this is only the beginning. The champagne flute trembled in Sarah Mitchell's hand as she stood among Manhattan's elite at the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. 8 months pregnant, her body squeezed into an elegant $4,000 maternity gown that clung to curves she barely recognized anymore. She felt like an imposter among the tech moguls and their perfectly sculpted wives who looked like they'd never carried a child, never sacrificed their careers, never made themselves small to fit into someone else's vision of who they should be. Her husband Derek stood at the center of a circle of admirers, holding court about his latest business acquisition, his voice carrying that particular tone of confidence that came from never being told no, never being questioned, never doubting for a single moment that he deserved every success that came his way. Sarah watched him, this man she'd married 5 years ago, in a ceremony that had felt like a fairy tale, and tried to remember the exact moment when she'd started feeling so invisible, so insignificant, so completely erased from her own life. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across the museum's grand hall, where paintings worth millions hung on walls and conversations worth billions floated through air thick with expensive perfume and masculine ambition. This was Derek's world. Sarah was just visiting, allowed entry on his arm, permitted to exist in these spaces only because of her connection to him. The market's ripe for disruption, Derek was saying to a circle of men in suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. We're looking at a Q4 acquisition that'll triple our market share. Conservative estimate, we're talking $200 million in new revenue streams. The men nodded, impressed. Their wives stood slightly behind them, ornamental and silent, playing their assigned roles perfectly. Sarah recognized the performance because she'd been giving the same one for years now. Derek, what if we donated $100,000 to the Children's Hospital? Sarah heard herself say during a brief lull in conversation. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, too loud in the sophisticated murmur of the gala. They're raising funds for the pediatric cancer wing. I read about it in the program. They need equipment, new facilities. We could make a real difference. The circle turned toward her, all eyes suddenly on Sarah. She felt her face flush, felt the baby kick hard against her ribs as if sensing her mother's discomfort, felt the weight of attention she hadn't meant to draw. Derek's face did something complicated. For just a split second, Sarah saw something cold flash in his eyes, something dark and angry that made her stomach clench. Then his public smile returned, that charming expression he wore like armor in social situations, and he laughed, loudly. "Sweetheart, that's adorable," Derek said, his voice carrying across the immediate area. Other conversations paused, more people turned to watch. "That's like half my monthly car payment. You don't understand these numbers." Laughter rippled through the circle like a wave. A tech entrepreneur in a $5,000 Tom Ford suit grinned, showing teeth whitened to an unnatural brightness. "Dude, maybe get her an allowance app? There's this great one called Mint. Helps people track their spending, understand budgets. My nanny uses it." More laughter. Sarah's face burned. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to cease existing entirely in this moment of public humiliation. "I've tried," Derek continued, warming to his audience now, enjoying the attention, the sympathetic nods from the other men who clearly dealt with similar frustrations from their own financially illiterate wives. "But you can't teach financial literacy to someone who's never earned real money. She was making, what, $60,000 as a coder when I met her?" He looked at Sarah as if trying to remember. "I'm not saying she's dumb. I'm saying she's financially innocent. There's a difference." "My wife's the same way," another man chimed in, a venture capitalist whose company Derek had been courting. "They don't understand the scale we operate at. Last month, mine wanted to buy a $40,000 handbag. 40,000. I had to explain that money doesn't grow on trees. The irony was lost on him. His wife stood 3 feet away wearing jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. Derek's mother, Jennifer, materialized beside them like a designer-clad specter. She was 70 but looked 50, maintained through a rigorous schedule of personal trainers, plastic surgeons, and sheer force of will. Old Boston money. She'd married into tech money when Derek's father had made his fortune in the dot-com boom, then died of a heart attack at 55, leaving her a very wealthy widow with very specific ideas about how the world should work. "Sarah, dear," Jennifer said, her voice dripping with false sympathy that barely concealed her contempt, "perhaps stick to discussing baby things. Names, nursery colors, that sort of thing. Leave the financial decisions to those who understand them." She touched Sarah's arm with fingers heavy with diamonds. "You look tired. Pregnancy is so taxing. Why don't you sit down? Derek can handle the adult conversations." The circle nodded sympathetically. "Poor thing," their expression said, "living off her husband's generosity. Doesn't understand money. Probably married him for his wealth. Gold digger who got pregnant to lock him down." Sarah felt the baby kick again, harder this time, as if Hope, they decided on the name Hope if it was a girl, was protesting this treatment of her mother. Sarah's hand moved automatically to her belly, a protective gesture she'd developed over the past 8 months. "Excuse me," Sarah said quietly. "I need the restroom." She walked away slowly, carefully navigating through the crowd in heels that had seemed manageable when she'd put them on 3 hours ago, but now felt like instruments of torture. She felt their eyes on her back, heard the conversation resume without her, heard Derek's laughter and the laughter of the men surrounding him. The bathroom was empty, thank God. Sarah locked herself in the largest stall, the one designed for handicapped access, and leaned against the cool marble wall. She took deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart, trying not to cry and ruin the professional makeup that had taken 45 minutes to apply. Her clutch sat on the small shelf beside the toilet paper holder. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. The screen lit up, showing her home screen, a photo of her and Derek from their wedding day, both of them smiling, both of them young and in love, and completely unaware of how their story would unfold. Sarah opened an app, not one of the obvious ones on her home screen. Those were all monitored, checked, controlled. She swiped to a hidden folder, entered a passcode Derek didn't know, opened an application that looked like a period tracker, but was actually something else entirely. The Bitcoin wallet app loaded. The numbers appeared on the screen, as shocking now as they'd been 4 months ago when she'd first discovered them. Balance, 27,000 Bitcoin. Price per Bitcoin, $67,000. Total value, $1,809,000,000. Sarah stared at the screen. The numbers didn't change. They never changed. Well, they changed a little. Bitcoin prices fluctuated, but the fundamental truth remained constant. She had $1.8 billion. Derek had just humiliated her in front of 200 people for suggesting they donate $100,000 to sick children. $100,000 that represented 0.0055% of her actual net worth. She'd done the math several times. She was good at math. MIT graduate, degree in computer science with a focus on cryptography. She understood numbers better than Derek ever would, and he had absolutely no idea. Sarah looked at her reflection in the polished metal of the stall door. She saw a pregnant woman in an expensive dress, exhausted and humiliated. She saw a wife who had been systematically diminished over 5 years of marriage. She saw a victim of financial and emotional abuse who'd lost her job, her friends, her independence, her sense of self, but she also saw something else, something Derek couldn't see because he'd never bothered to look. She saw a woman with resources, with options, with power. She saw a billionaire who'd been playing poor for 4 months while she figured out her next move. That morning, God, it felt like a lifetime ago, but had only been hours. Derek had been sitting at their kitchen island reviewing household expenses while eating his organic Greek yogurt with imported granola. Their Boston brownstone had been quiet except for the sounds of early morning, birds outside, coffee maker burbling, Derek's fingers tapping against his iPad screen. "Sarah, why is the grocery bill $847 this month?" Derek had asked without looking up from his iPad. His tone was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made it worse. "Are you eating for three?" His hand had reached out to pat her belly, a gesture that once might have felt affectionate but now felt condescending, proprietary, like she was livestock being checked for quality. "I bought organic produce like Dr. Morrison recommended," Sarah had said quietly. She'd learned to keep her voice quiet, to avoid triggering his anger. She said organic is better for the baby's development. "Fewer pesticides. Organic is a marketing scam," Derek had interrupted, still not looking at her. "Regular food is fine. People have been having healthy babies for thousands of years without organic kale. 600 maximum next month." Not a discussion, not a negotiation, a pronouncement. An order from the man who controlled the money, who paid for everything, who reminded her constantly that she had nothing of her own. Sarah had nodded, said nothing, swallowed her words like she'd been doing for years now, like she'd been taught to do through a process so gradual she hadn't noticed it happening until it was already complete. 30 minutes later, she'd been in their bedroom trying to check her email on her old laptop, the one from before she'd met Derek, the one she'd kept even though he'd bought her a new MacBook Pro that he'd set up himself, installing tracking software he thought she didn't know about. Derek had walked in, his eyes narrowing immediately. "Why are you on your computer? Dr. Morrison said no stress. What are you looking at?" The accusation in his voice had been unmistakable. The implication that she was hiding something, doing something wrong, betraying him somehow. "Just old photos from college," Sarah had lied smoothly. She'd gotten good at lying. 5 years of marriage to Derek had made her an expert in small deceptions, tiny rebellions that kept some small part of herself separate from his control. Nostalgia. "Rebecca sent me some pictures from our MIT days." "Let me see." Not a request, a demand. Sarah had closed the laptop quickly, forced a smile that felt like broken glass in her mouth. "It's nothing. Really. Just being silly. Pregnancy hormones, you know." Derek's eyes had lingered on her face, searching for deception, looking for cracks in her story. But he'd let it go, secure in his belief that Sarah had nowhere to hide, nothing to hide, no resources or ability to keep secrets from him. That was Derek's fundamental mistake. He believed his own narrative about Sarah's powerlessness. He'd convinced himself so thoroughly that she was dependent, helpless, grateful for his support that he couldn't see the truth even when it was staring him in the face. At 8 o'clock in their driveway, they'd stood beside her car. Sarah's 2015 Honda Civic sat between Derek's Tesla Model S and his Porsche 911, looking shabby and out of place in their carefully curated, wealthy neighborhood. "When are you going to let me sell this junker?" Derek had asked, gesturing at the Civic with barely concealed disgust. "It's embarrassing. Our neighbors probably think we're poor." "It's the car I bought myself when I had my job," Sarah had said, running her hand along the hood. The paint was faded, the interior had stains, but it was hers. The only thing she owned that had her name on the title, that she'd purchased with money she'd earned, that represented a time when she'd been independent. "I like it." "You bought yourself with what money exactly?" Derek had smiled that patronizing smile that made Sarah want to scream. "Your entire annual salary for a year wouldn't cover my monthly expenses. Hell, it wouldn't cover my car insurance." The words had stung because they were designed to sting. That was Derek's specialty. Words that hurt while maintaining plausible deniability. Words that cut deep while allowing him to claim later that he'd been joking, that she was too sensitive, that she was overreacting. "It's paid off. It runs fine," Sarah had said quietly. "After the baby comes, we're getting rid of it. You'll use the Tesla. I'll get something new. Maybe that new electric Porsche. Have you seen it? Beautiful machine." Not a discussion, not a negotiation. A decision made without her input about her property. At 8:30, passing by Derek's home office on her way to the nursery, Sarah had heard him on the phone. She'd stopped outside the door, listening to a conversation he'd thought was private. Yeah, the post-nup is drafted, Derek had been saying. My lawyer looked it over. Airtight. She gets $500,000 for 5 years of marriage. Waives all claims to my business assets, my investments, future earnings. She'll sign. Where else is she going to go? 8 months pregnant with no income. I'm being generous with the terms, considering she brought nothing to the marriage financially. A pause while the person on the other end spoke. Vanessa, relax. I'll handle my wife. You handle the quarterly projections. And yes, I'll be at your place tonight after the gala. We'll have the whole night. Another pause. Derek's voice had dropped lower, more intimate. I love you too. Sarah had stood frozen in the hallway. She'd known about the affair for months. She'd found texts, noticed late nights, smelled unfamiliar perfume. But hearing him say, I love you to Vanessa Price, his vice president of sales, the woman he spent more waking hours with than his pregnant wife, had cut deeper than she'd expected. Because once Derek had said those words to her, once she'd believed them, once she'd thought she'd found her person, her partner, her happily ever after. Now, hours later, standing in the museum bathroom staring at her phone screen, Sarah made a decision. She typed a text to Diane Rodriguez, the only person who knew about the Bitcoin, the only person who knew Sarah had been planning this moment for 4 months, a lawyer who specialized in protecting women from financial abuse, who'd helped dozens of wives escape controlling husbands, who understood that money was power and power was freedom. Diane, it's time. I'm ready to burn it down. Tomorrow morning. 3 dots appeared immediately. Diane was awake, waiting, ready. You sure no going back after this? Sarah looked at her reflection one more time. At the expensive dress Derek had bought her, constantly reminding her it was a gift, that she should be grateful. At the diamond earrings he'd given her for their anniversary, never letting her forget their cost. At the perfectly styled hair and professional makeup that transformed her into the wife Derek wanted her to be. Beautiful, silent, obedient. Tomorrow that woman would disappear. Tomorrow, Grace Thompson from Scranton, Pennsylvania, MIT graduate, computer science expert, accidentally billionaire, would resurface. Tomorrow, Derek Mitchell would learn what happened when you underestimated your wife. Sarah typed, I've never been more sure of anything. She deleted the text thread, cleared her history, closed the app. The phone screen returned to that wedding photo, young Sarah and young Derek, smiling at the camera, unaware that the man in the photo would spend the next 5 years systematically destroying the woman beside him. Or trying to destroy her, because Derek had made one critical error in his campaign of control. He'd assumed that Sarah's quiet compliance meant she'd given up, that her apparent acceptance of his dominance meant she'd surrendered. He'd mistaken strategic retreat for defeat. Tomorrow, he'd learn the difference. Sarah straightened her dress, checked her makeup, practiced her smile in the mirror. She walked back out to the gala, back to Derek's side, back to her performance as the grateful wife who didn't understand money. But inside, she was already free. Inside, she was already gone. Tomorrow morning, the war would begin, and Derek had no idea he'd already lost. 4 months earlier, on a humid Tuesday in late May, Sarah had been organizing boxes in the storage room of their Boston brownstone. The room was dusty and cluttered with the accumulated detritus of 2 combined lives. Derek's MIT memorabilia, Sarah's college textbooks, wedding gifts they'd never used, furniture from Derek's bachelor apartment that didn't fit their married aesthetic. Sarah was 4 months pregnant then, just starting to show, driven by an intense nesting instinct that made her want to clean, organize, prepare. Derek was at his office downtown, working late as usual, or so he said. Sarah had learned not to ask too many questions about his schedule, learned that curiosity was viewed as suspicion. That suspicion was evidence of her paranoia, her irrationality, her inability to trust. The storage room window was open, letting in warm spring air that smelled of flowering trees and fresh possibilities. Sarah had been going through boss methodically, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. She was trying to make space for the baby, trying to create room in their carefully curated life for this new person who would change everything. She'd found a box labeled MIT, Sarah's books, in her own handwriting from years ago. The cardboard was soft with age. The packing tape yellowed. Inside were textbooks from her undergraduate years, notebooks filled with equations and code, her graduation cap with its tassel still attached, a photo of her and Rebecca at commencement, both of them grinning at the camera, young and hopeful and full of dreams. And there, tucked inside her Introduction to Cryptography textbook, was a piece of paper. Sarah had pulled it out, unfolded it, stared at words written in her younger self's handwriting. Neat, precise letters spelling out 12 words. Ocean, butterfly, mountain, storm, whisper, garden, thunder, dream, crystal, river, phoenix, horizon. For a moment, the words meant nothing. Random poetry? Some sort of code from a class project? Then memory hit like lightning, sudden and illuminating and completely overwhelming. Fall semester, 2011. Sarah had been 19 years old, a sophomore at MIT, brilliant but broke, surviving on work-study wages and student loans. Professor James Henderson, an eccentric computer science lecturer with wild gray hair and a tendency to wear the same tweed jacket every day, had been teaching an experimental class on cryptocurrency and distributed systems. "Who here has heard of Bitcoin?" Professor Henderson had asked the small seminar group one afternoon. No hands had gone up. This was 2011. Bitcoin was still obscure, trading at around $3 per coin, discussed mainly in libertarian message boards and cryptography forums. Most people had never heard of it. Those who had thought it was either a scam or an interesting but ultimately doomed experiment. Fascinating stuff, Professor Henderson had continued, his enthusiasm infectious despite his disheveled appearance. Decentralized currency, peer-to-peer transactions. No banks, no government control, no central authority. Could be revolutionary. Could change everything about how we think about money, value, trust. He'd pulled up a chart on the projection screen. Currently trading at $3 per coin. If you wanted to buy some as a learning experiment, you could own 33 Bitcoins for about $100. Might be worthless in a year. Might be worth a fortune. That's the beauty of innovation. You never know until you try. After class, Sarah had approached Professor Henderson with a question that had been bothering her throughout the lecture. "Professor, about this Bitcoin thing, is it safe? I mean, is it a legitimate investment? Or is it a Ponzi scheme?" Professor Henderson had studied her with those sharp blue eyes that saw more than most people. "Safe? Who knows? Legitimate? Depends on your definition. But that's how innovation works, Miss Thompson. Small bets on big ideas. Worst case scenario, you lose your lunch money. Best case?" He'd shrugged, a gesture that encompassed infinite possibility. "You're part of history." That night in her cramped dorm room, she'd been living in a triple to save money, sharing 70 square feet with two other women. Sarah had done something impulsive. She checked her bank account. $1,247 total, earned from washing dishes in the dining hall, from tutoring other students in calculus and computer science, from every spare hour she could scrape together while carrying a full course load. Rent was due, $400. Food budget for the month, $200. Textbooks she still needed, $150. That left about $500 in savings, money she'd been carefully hoarding for emergencies. Sarah had stared at her bank balance for a long time. $500 represented security. It was her safety net, her cushion against disaster. Spending it on cryptocurrency, something she barely understood, something that might be worthless tomorrow, seemed reckless. But something in Professor Henderson's words had stayed with her. Small bets on big ideas. Innovation required risk. And wasn't that what education was supposed to teach? How to evaluate risk, how to make calculated decisions, how to bet on yourself. Sarah had made her decision. She'd opened Coinbase, one of the few early exchanges making Bitcoin accessible to regular people. She'd gone through the verification process. And then, heart-pounding, she'd bought $900 worth of Bitcoin. At $3 per coin, that gave her 300 Bitcoins. 300 digital coins that existed only as encrypted data, protected by cryptographic keys that she wrote down carefully on a piece of paper. A 12-word recovery phrase, randomly generated, that could restore access to her Bitcoin wallet from any device, anywhere in the world. Ocean, butterfly, mountain, storm, whisper, garden, thunder, dream, crystal, river, phoenix, horizon. She'd written those words carefully, double-checked them against the screen, then stored the paper in her cryptography textbook. She told herself she'd check on her investment in a year, see if Professor Henderson's optimism was justified. Except life had happened. Finals, summer break, junior year, senior year, graduation in 2014, moving to Boston for a job at a small tech company, apartment hunting, dating. The textbook had been packed in a box, stored at her parents' house in Scranton, then eventually moved to a storage unit when her parents downsized. Then she'd met Derek. The memory of their first meeting was still vivid despite everything that came after. TechCrunch Boston, September 2019. Derek had been the keynote speaker, 33 years old and already successful, CEO of Mitchell Tech Enterprises, fresh off a lucrative acquisition that had netted him $12 million. He'd been charismatic on stage, funny and confident, talking about disruption and innovation with the casual assurance of someone who'd never failed at anything significant. Sarah had been in the audience attending on behalf of her company, and she'd asked a question during the Q&A about blockchain integration. After the talk, Derek had found her. "You asked the smartest question," he'd said, his smile warm and genuine. "Most people don't understand the implications of distributed ledger technology. Let me buy you dinner and we can talk about it." The romance had been a whirlwind. Derek pursued her with single-minded intensity. Flowers delivered to her office, reservations at expensive restaurants she'd never been able to afford on her $60,000 salary, weekend trips to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, where they'd stayed at his family's properties. "You're brilliant," Derek had told her after 3 weeks of dating. "Not many women understand technology like you do. Most of my exes couldn't tell blockchain from chainmail." He'd made her feel special, seen, valued for her intelligence rather than despite it. They'd married in June 2020, a small ceremony at the Boston Public Library with just family and close friends. Sarah had worn a simple white dress. Derek had cried during his vows. It had felt perfect, like the beginning of a wonderful adventure. The first year had been happy. They'd cooked together, watched movies, talked about their dreams. Derek had been supportive when Sarah mentioned wanting to start her own consulting business. "Quit your job," he'd encouraged. "I'll support you while you build your client base. That's what partners do. We invest in each other." Sarah had been touched by his generosity. She'd given notice at the tech company, excited about the possibilities of working for herself. Then came the miscarriage. They had gotten pregnant quickly, easily, carelessly. At 12 weeks, Sarah had started bleeding. They had rushed to the hospital. The ultrasound had shown nothing, no heartbeat, no movement, just emptiness where life should have been. Derek had been devastated, so had Sarah. They'd grieved together, held each other through the worst of it, but then Derek had said something that should have been a warning sign. Maybe it was the stress of starting a business. "You were working too hard, not taking care of yourself. Let's pause the consultancy. Focus on your health." And at the time, grieving and exhausted, Sarah had agreed. It made sense. She'd take time to heal, physically and emotionally. The consulting business could wait, except it never started again. Instead, Derek's suggestions began. Small at first, easy to rationalize, presented as being for her benefit. "Let's combine our bank accounts. It's easier for taxes. Plus, you won't have to worry about managing money while you're recovering. I'll handle the bills. You focus on healing, less stress for you. Your MIT friends are kind of intense, always talking about work and ambition. Maybe take a break from them. Spend time with people who have different priorities. My mother's book club would love to have you. Why do you need your own credit card? We have the joint account. Just use that for everything. It simplifies tracking expenses." Each change seemed reasonable in isolation. Each erosion of independence came with justification. But together over 18 months, they created a cage. By 2022, Sarah had no job, no income, no separate bank account, no credit in her own name, no friends who weren't approved by Derek, no activities that weren't monitored. When she'd finally found texts on Derek's phone in early 2023 and confronted him about the affair with Vanessa, he turned it around completely. "You went through my phone? What is wrong with you? Are you paranoid? Is this some kind of hormonal thing? Should we get you therapy?" The gaslighting had been expert. Sarah had ended up apologizing for violating his privacy, doubting her own perceptions, wondering if she was overreacting to innocent work messages. That was the power of abuse. It made you question reality, made you doubt yourself, made you complicit in your own diminishment. So when Sarah found the Bitcoin recovery phrase 4 months ago, sitting in that dusty storage room, she'd known immediately that she couldn't tell Derek. Because if she did, it would become his. He would manage it, control it, invest it according to his strategy. He would remind her constantly that he was the expert, that she didn't understand finance, that she should be grateful he was willing to handle such a massive responsibility for her. The Bitcoin would stop being hers and become his, just like everything else. Sarah's hands had shaken as she downloaded a Bitcoin wallet app on her phone. Not a regular phone. Derek monitored that one, checking her messages and emails regularly to make sure she wasn't stressing herself with work stuff. But an old phone she'd kept hidden, one she'd told him was broken and thrown away, but had actually been secretly maintaining. She'd entered the 12-word recovery phrase, letter by letter, double-checking each word against the paper. The app had synced with the blockchain, searching through 13 years of transaction history, connecting to her original wallet from 2011. "Checking balance," the screen had said. Then numbers appeared. Numbers that made no sense. Numbers so large, Sarah's brain couldn't initially process them. Original purchase, 300 Bitcoin. But that wasn't what the screen showed. Because Bitcoin had changed dramatically since 2011. There had been forks, splits, airdrops, all sorts of technical events that had multiplied holdings in complicated ways. Bitcoin Cash Fork in 2017. Her 300 Bitcoin had generated 300 Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin SV Fork, additional coins. Various airdrops and splits over the years. More coins. The app had calculated the total value of all her holdings, converted everything to Bitcoin equivalents. Total, 27,000 Bitcoin. Current price, $65,000 per Bitcoin. Total value, $1,755,000,000. Sarah had stared at the screen. She'd blinked, looked away, looked back. The numbers didn't change. She'd run to the bathroom and vomited into the toilet. Morning sickness compounded by shock, by disbelief, by a sudden terrifying understanding of what this meant. She'd sat on the bathroom floor, hands shaking, and done the math again, and again, and again, each time reaching the same conclusion. $1.75 billion. With a B, Derek thought she was dependent on him. Derek thought she needed his $12 million, his brownstone, his financial support. Derek gave her an allowance of $500 a week in expected gratitude, and she had 146 times his net worth. Sarah had started laughing then, sitting on the bathroom floor. Hysterical laughter that turned into crying, that turned back into laughter. She'd laughed until her stomach hurt, until tears ran down her face, until the sheer absurdity of the situation overwhelmed her. For days afterwards, she'd done nothing but think about what to do. Tell Derek? Keep it secret? Run away? The Bitcoin represented options. Freedom, power, everything she'd lost over 5 years of marriage now returned in the most unlikely way possible. Sarah had decided to keep it secret, at least temporarily. She'd needed time to understand what she had, to protect it, to make sure Derek couldn't take it from her. She'd consulted anonymously with lawyers specializing in cryptocurrency and asset protection. She'd learned about cold storage wallets, offshore accounts, trusts, legal structures that could shield assets from divorce proceedings. She'd split her Bitcoin across multiple wallets, each secured with different encryption. She'd created backup recovery phrases, stored them in safety deposit boxes in 3 different cities under false name. She'd moved portions of her holdings through Swiss banks, Cayman Island accounts, legal entities and jurisdictions with strong privacy protections. She'd spent 4 months building walls around her money, making it impossible for Derek to touch even if he somehow discovered it. And she documented everything, every controlling behavior, every cruel comment, every isolation tactic. She'd built a case showing systematic financial and emotional abuse, evidence that would matter in divorce court, that would protect her custody rights, that would show the world who Derek really was. Sarah had been preparing for war, quietly, methodically, patiently, because she'd learned from Derek. She'd watched him for 5 years, studied his tactics, understood his strategies. He'd taught her that power came from information, from controlling the narrative, from making your opponent underestimate you. Now she was using those lessons against him. Tomorrow morning, the war would begin. Derek would learn that his quiet, obedient, financially illiterate wife was actually a billionaire who'd been planning his destruction for 4 months. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, Sarah had one more performance to give. One more appearance as the grateful wife who didn't understand money. One more night in the golden cage before she walked out the door. She finished freshening her makeup in the museum bathroom. She practiced her smile in the mirror. She walked back out to the gala, back to Derek's side, back into character. "There you are," Derek said when she returned. "We were just talking about the Anderson deal. I was telling everyone how you helped me with some of the technical details. Gave me great insights about user interface design." A lie, of course. Sarah hadn't helped with anything. Derek never asked her opinion about his business. But the story made him look good. The supportive husband who valued his wife's contributions, who saw her as a partner. "Happy to help," Sarah said with her performative smile. Derek's arm went around her waist, possessive. "We make a great team." The men in the circle nodded approvingly. A successful man with a beautiful, supportive wife. The American dream, if only they knew. Tomorrow. Tomorrow they'd know. Tomorrow Derek's perfect life would explode. Sarah could hardly wait. The next morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Sunlight streamed through the windows of their Boston brownstone. Birds sang in the trees outside. Coffee brewed in the kitchen, where Derek sat reviewing quarterly projections on his iPad while eating his usual breakfast of Greek yogurt with imported granola that cost $14 per bag. Sarah had barely slept. She'd lain awake most of the night, reviewing her plan, anticipating Derek's reactions, preparing for every possible outcome. Now, standing in the doorway of Derek's home office at 9 in the morning, she felt strangely calm. The decision was made. The die was cast. Whatever happened next, at least she'd be free. Derek was on a video call, his face visible on the large monitor on his desk. Vanessa Price filled the other half of the screen, professional in a tailored blouse, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She was beautiful in that polished, intimidating way that made Sarah feel small and inadequate, which was probably the point. "The post-nup is ready," Derek was saying, his voice confident. "My lawyer looked it over yesterday, airtight. She gets $500,000 for 5 years of marriage. Waives all claims to my business assets, my investments, future earnings, everything. Standard asset protection in case of divorce." "And you think she'll sign?" Vanessa asked. Her voice held skepticism, maybe even concern. "She's been resistant before." "She'll sign," Derek said with absolute certainty. "Where else is she going to go? 8 months pregnant, no job, no income, no prospects. I'm being generous with the terms, honestly. Most guys in my position wouldn't offer anything. But I'm not heartless. $500K is enough for her to start over, get an apartment, live comfortably." "You're too good to her," Vanessa said. Her tone suggested she thought Derek was being far too generous, that Sarah deserved nothing. "I try to be fair," Derek said. He believed this, Sarah realized. He genuinely believed he was being reasonable, generous even, in offering her $500,000 for 5 years of her life, for her career sacrificed, for her independence erased, for her identity lost. "When will you tell her about us?" Vanessa asked. "About our plans?" "After the baby," Derek said. "After I get the post-nup signed. 6 months, maybe a year, then I'll file for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. We'll split custody, though honestly I'll probably get primary given my financial stability. Then you and I can finally be together publicly. Buy that house in Wellesley you've been looking at. Maybe another kid if you want. Start over properly." "I'd like that," Vanessa said softly. "I love you, Derek. I love you too." The words hung in the air, casual and devastating. Sarah had heard enough. She opened the door fully and walked in, 8 months pregnant, carrying her iPad, her face calm despite her pounding heart. Derek looked up, startled. His hand moved immediately to end the video call. "Vanessa, I'll call you back." The screen went dark. He turned to Sarah with barely concealed annoyance. "Sarah, I'm working. What do you need? Is something wrong with the baby?" Always his first concern, not her, but the baby, the heir, the continuation of his legacy. "We need to talk," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, controlled. She'd practiced this moment in her mind 100 times. "Can it wait?" Derek checked his Apple Watch, a habit that always made Sarah feel like an interruption in his important schedule. "I have a board meeting in 30 minutes. Conference call with investors about the Q3 numbers." "No, it can't wait. Sit down." Something in Sarah's tone made Derek's eyes narrow. She sounded different, harder, more certain, not the soft, apologetic voice he was used to hearing from his wife. "Excuse me?" Derek's voice held warning. He didn't like being told what to do, especially not by Sarah, and especially not in his own office. "I said sit down," Sarah repeated calmly, "or I'll have this conversation with Vanessa present. Your choice. I can call her back right now. We can all discuss this together." Derek's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, calculation. He sat slowly, his posture defensive, his eyes watching Sarah like she was a wild animal that might attack. "What's this about?" Sarah closed the office door behind her. She walked to Derek's desk and placed her iPad on the polished mahogany surface, screen side up. "I'm not signing your post-nup." Derek laughed. It was a condescending sound, the laugh of a parent dealing with a child's unreasonable demand. "Sarah, we discussed this multiple times. It's standard for people with significant assets to protect themselves in case of divorce. You should feel lucky I'm offering you anything. Most men would—" "I'm not signing it because it's insulting," Sarah interrupted. Her voice remained calm. "$500,000 for 5 years of servitude, isolation, and emotional abuse? For giving up my career, my friends, my independence, my sense of self? For being controlled, monitored, diminished, and gaslighted? No, I'm not signing." Derek stood up, his face reddening. "Servitude? Are you insane? I've given you everything. This house." He gestured around the office at the expensive furniture, the original art on the walls. "Your lifestyle, your security, your health care, your life. You'd be nothing without me. You were making $60,000 working for some nobody tech company when I met you. I elevated you. I gave you access to my world, my connections, my success. And this is how you repay me? By calling it servitude?" "You took my job," Sarah said quietly. "You convinced me to quit under the pretense of supporting my consulting business, then made sure that business never started. You took my bank accounts, put everything in joint accounts you control. You took my credit cards, gave me an allowance like I'm a child. You took my friends, called them negative influences until I stopped seeing them. You took my independence, piece by piece, decision by decision, until I had nothing left that was mine." "That's ridiculous," Derek said, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or just annoyance at being called out. "I was protecting you, supporting you. That's what husbands do." "No," Sarah said. She picked up her iPad. "That's what abusers do. They isolate, they control, they make you dependent, they convince you it's love." She tapped the screen, opened the Bitcoin wallet app, and placed the iPad back on Derek's desk facing him. "But here's the thing, Derek. I don't need your protection. I don't need your support. I don't need you at all." Derek looked at the screen. His face went white, then red, then white again as his brain processed what he was seeing. Bitcoin wallet. Balance 27,000 BTC. Current price $67,000 BTC. Total value 1,809,000. The silence in the office was absolute, crushing. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath, waiting for Derek's reaction. What? Derek's voice came out as a whisper. What is this? That's my Bitcoin wallet, Sarah said calmly. I bought Bitcoin in 2011 when I was at MIT. $900 worth, 300 coins at $3 each. I forgot about it for 13 years. I found the recovery phrase 4 months ago while organizing the storage room. With forks and splits, those 300 coins became 27,000 coins. Derek's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, on those impossible numbers. Billion, he finally managed. That says billion. Yes, billion with a B, as in, I have 150 times your net worth, as in, I could buy your company 15 times over, as in, I could buy this house, this entire block, and barely notice the expense, as in, everything you've told me about money, about my dependence on you, about my financial ignorance, all of it was bullshit. Derek's face went through a rapid transformation. Shock gave way to confusion. Confusion to disbelief. Disbelief to rage. Pure, undiluted rage. You've had this for 4 months? His voice rose to a shout. 4 months? You've been sitting on $1.8 billion while I've been supporting you, paying for everything, managing our finances? Supporting me? Sarah's voice remained calm, which seemed to enrage Derek even more. You imprisoned me. You took my job under false pretenses. You isolated me from friends and family. You made me ask permission for every purchase. You monitored my phone, my email, my location. You gave me an allowance of $500 a week and expected gratitude. You humiliated me last night in front of 200 people for suggesting we donate $100,000 to sick children, which, by the way, is 0.0055% of my actual net worth. That's marital property, Derek shouted. Massachusetts law. We're married. I own half. Community property state. No, Sarah said. She'd prepared for this argument, consulted with lawyers, knew the law better than Derek did. It's a premarital asset, acquired in 2011, 3 years before we met, held in my name only. My Bitcoin wallet, my encryption keys, my recovery phrase. You have no legal claim to it. My lawyer confirmed this multiple times. Derek lunged for the iPad. Sarah pulled it away smoothly, efficiently, like she'd been expecting this exact reaction. Because she had been. Touch me and I'll have you arrested for assault, Sarah said calmly. Diane Rodriguez, my lawyer, is on speed dial. So is 911. There are security cameras in this office. I had them installed last month while you were in San Francisco. Everything is being recorded, so please, Derek, give me a reason. Derek's hands shook with rage. His face had gone purple. A vein throbbed in his temple. For a moment, Sarah thought he might actually hit her, might finally escalate from emotional to physical violence. She stood her ground, iPad clutched to her chest, phone in her other hand, ready to call for help. But Derek had always been too smart for physical violence. Physical violence left marks, evidence, created witnesses. His abuse had always been psychological, financial, emotional, harder to prove, easier to deny, wrapped in the language of love and protection. You sneaky, manipulative bitch, Derek said, his voice shaking. You've been playing me this whole time, acting helpless, playing poor, letting me think I had control. This whole pregnancy, you've been planning this? No, Derek, I've been surviving you. There's a difference, but yes, for 4 months I've been planning my exit, because that's what you do when you're married to somebody who sees you as property instead of a person. You did, you do. Every day, every interaction, every decision made without my input. Every time you monitored my phone or questioned my spending or reminded me that everything we have is yours. You saw me as something you owned, something you controlled, something you could shape into whatever you wanted. Sarah moved toward the door. But I'm done surviving. I'm done being small. I'm done asking permission. I want a divorce. Divorce? Derek's sudden calm was terrifying. He sat back down, straightened his tie, composed his face. The rage disappeared, replaced by something colder. more calculated. You want a divorce? Okay, let's talk about divorce. There's nothing to talk about. I've already filed papers. You'll be served this afternoon by a process server. Diane has everything ready. I'm moving to a hotel today with Rebecca. You'll have the house to yourself. And you think you'll get custody? Derek's smile was cruel. Of our daughter? You really think a judge will give custody to you? Sarah felt the first flicker of real fear. What are you talking about? Think about it, Sarah. Really think. You hid $1.8 billion from your husband for 4 months. That's called deceptive behavior, pathological lying, mental instability. That's not, you isolated yourself from friends and family. Classic paranoid behavior. You refused to sign a reasonable postnuptial agreement designed to protect both parties. Irrational decision-making. And you're 8 months pregnant, Sarah. Hormonal, emotional, clearly not thinking straight. Derek leaned forward. So here's what a judge is going to hear. A woman who found $1 billion and kept it secret from her husband, who admits to building complex financial structures to hide assets, who by her own admission has been lying, deceiving, planning an escape for months. What does that sound like to you? Self-protection, Sarah said, but her voice had lost its certainty. It sounds like paranoid personality disorder, Derek said. It sounds like someone who can't trust, can't be honest, can't function in a normal relationship. It sounds like someone who needs psychological help. It sounds like someone who might not be stable enough to care for a newborn infant. He stood up, walked around his desk slowly, deliberately. Sarah backed toward the door. What judge is going to give a baby to a woman like that? Derek asked. A woman who hides billions, who admits to systematic deception, who clearly has serious trust issues, versus a successful businessman with a stable career, a beautiful home, financial security, no history of deception or instability? You're abusive, Sarah said. You've been controlling me for years. Says who? Where's your evidence? Did I ever hit you, ever threaten you, ever do anything that left marks? I gave you a beautiful home, financial security, everything you needed. I was a devoted husband. Any control you perceived was just me trying to help you, to manage our household, to prepare for our baby. That's what the court will hear. Derek was right in front of her now, invading her space, using his physical presence to intimidate. You're paranoid, Sarah. You found money and it made you crazy. That's what happened. You're mentally unstable and you need help. That's the story, and it's a lot more believable than yours. I won't let you take my baby, Sarah said. Tears formed in her eyes, the first crack in her composure. You don't have a choice, Derek said quietly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer half that Bitcoin, $900 million, into an account I control. You're going to sign a revised postnup that protects my interests, and we're going to stay married, at least until after the baby is born and we establish custody arrangements that favor me. I won't, or, Derek continued, I'll bury you in court. I'll drag this out for years. I'll hire the best lawyers, the best psychiatrists, the best investigators. I'll paint you as a mentally unstable gold digger who trapped me with the pregnancy and then hid assets. I'll get primary custody, maybe even sole custody. You'll get supervised visitation twice a month if you're lucky, and you'll pay me child support, which, given your net worth, will be about $50 million a year. His smile was cruel. Think about it. You can give me half now and keep your daughter. Or you can fight me, spend years in court, destroy your relationship with our child, and probably lose anyway. Your choice. But choose wisely, Sarah, because I'm done being nice. This is extortion, Sarah whispered. This is marriage, Derek said. This is partnership. This is you learning that actions have consequences. You think you can just walk away from me? After everything I've done for you? After I elevated you from a nobody coder to the wife of Derek Mitchell? He walked past her to the door, opened it. You have 24 hours to think about my offer. After that, the gloves come off. I'll file for emergency custody based on your mental instability. I'll freeze your assets as marital property. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. A liar, a manipulator, a gold digger who trapped a successful man and then tried to steal everything. Derek paused in the doorway. Oh, and Sarah, good luck finding a lawyer willing to represent you once they realize you've been hiding assets during our entire marriage. That's fraud. That's criminal. My lawyers will have a field day with that. He left. The office door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded final. Sarah stood alone, trembling. Her hand went to her belly where the baby, Hope, was kicking frantically, as if sensing her mother's distress. I won't let him take you, Sarah whispered to her unborn daughter. I promise I won't let him win. But for the first time since finding the Bitcoin, Sarah felt real fear. Not fear of being poor, not fear of losing money, fear of losing her daughter. Fear that Derek's threats weren't empty, that he really could paint her as unstable, that a conservative judge might see a billionaire who hid assets and decide she was unfit for custody. Sarah had prepared for financial warfare. She hadn't prepared for this. She pulled out her phone, called Diane Rodriguez. He knows, Sarah said when Diane answered. I told him, and he's threatening to take Hope. Come to my office, Diane said immediately. Right now. We need to strategize. This is going to get ugly. Sarah, are you ready for that? Sarah looked around Derek's office. At his Harvard degree on the wall, his awards and commendations, his photos with politicians and CEOs. At the trappings of success and respectability that would shield him in court. I don't have a choice, Sarah said. He gave me 24 hours to surrender, or he files for custody. We need to move first. Then let's move, Diane said. Get out of that house. Meet me in an hour. And Sarah, this is war now. No more being nice. No more trying to be fair. We fight dirty or we lose. Are you ready for that? Sarah thought about Hope, about the daughter she'd been carrying for 8 months, the little girl who would be born into this mess. She thought about what kind of example she wanted to set, what kind of mother she wanted to be. Not a victim, not someone who surrendered, not someone who let fear control her. I'm ready, Sarah said. Let's burn him down. She hung up, grabbed her purse, and walked out of Derek's office for the last time. The war had begun, and Sarah was done playing defense. It was time to show Derek Mitchell what happened when you underestimated a woman with $1 billion and nothing left to lose. 3 days later, Sarah stood in Suffolk County Courthouse, her 8-month pregnant body feeling like an anchor dragging her down. The courthouse was one of those intimidating government buildings designed to make people feel small. High ceilings, marble floors, the lingering smell of old paper and human anxiety. She'd been here before for jury duty years ago, back when she'd been a different person, back when Derek had still been the charming man she thought she'd married. Now she was here fighting for her daughter. Judge Patricia Thornton presided over the emergency hearing Derek had managed to schedule with surprising speed. Money and connections, Sarah had learned, could move mountains, or at least move court dates. Judge Thornton was in her late 50s, stern and no nonsense, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She had a reputation for being conservative, by the book, unswayed by emotional appeals. Sarah sat at the defendant's table with Diane Rodriguez beside her. Diane looked fierce in her tailored suit, her dark eyes flashing with controlled anger at Derek's tactics. She'd been preparing for this hearing for 72 hours straight, anticipating every argument Derek's lawyers might make. Derek sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, Gerald Stevens, a shark in a $3,000 suit who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. Stevens was in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of smooth confidence that came from winning more cases than he lost. Your Honor, Stevens began when Judge Thornton called the hearing to order. We're seeking emergency temporary custody based on Mrs. Mitchell's documented pattern of deceptive behavior and mental instability that poses a potential risk to the unborn child. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. Hearing it said out loud, in official legal language, made it sound real, made it sound credible. Diane shot to her feet. This is absurd, Your Honor. Having premarital assets isn't evidence of mental illness. Mrs. Mitchell protected her financial security from a controlling spouse. That's rational behavior, not mental instability. Judge Thornton raised her hand. Counsel, I'll hear the evidence. Proceed, Mr. Stevens. Stevens pulled out a folder thick with documents. Your Honor, the evidence shows a troubling pattern. First, the financial deception. Mrs. Mitchell concealed $1.8 billion from her spouse for 4 months. Not a small amount, $1.8 billion. She admits to creating complex offshore accounts, multiple wallets, elaborate security structures. This level of deception suggests pathological lying and paranoid behavior. He clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the screen at the front of the courtroom. Bank statements, cryptocurrency transactions, account structures. It all looked damning when presented this way, stripped of context. Second, social isolation, Stevens continued. Mrs. Mitchell has no friends, no support system outside her sister, no employment history for the past 3 years. She quit her job shortly after marriage and has been completely dependent on my client financially. She's isolated because Mr. Mitchell systematically removed her support system, Diane interjected. Counsel, Judge Thornton warned. You'll have your turn. Mr. Stevens, continue. Third, pregnancy hormones and emotional instability. Medical experts confirm that pregnancy causes significant mood swings, irrational decision-making, and potential harm to infant if mother is under extreme stress. Mrs. Mitchell admits to lying to her husband for months, creating elaborate deceptions, planning what she calls an escape. This is not the behavior of a stable person preparing to become a mother. Stevens pulled out more documents. We have statements from Mr. Mitchell documenting concerning behavior, secretive phone calls, hidden devices, paranoid accusations of monitoring and control when Mr. Mitchell was simply trying to support his pregnant wife. We have testimony from the couple's joint therapist. We never had a joint therapist, Sarah whispered to Diane, documenting Mrs. Mitchell's trust issues, her inability to communicate openly, her tendency toward deception rather than honest conversation. That's a lie, Sarah said louder, so. We never went to therapy together. I've never even met with a therapist since we got married. Judge Thornton looked at Stevens. Counsel, do you have documentation for this therapist? Stevens looked momentarily flustered. My apologies, Your Honor. I misspoke. That's from Mr. Mitchell's individual therapist, who he consulted about his wife's concerning behavior. So Derek had been building a case, Sarah realized. Talking to a therapist about his concerns, creating a paper trail that made her look unstable. Fourth and finally, Stevens said, we have the Bitcoin discovery itself. Finding $1 billion and hiding it isn't normal behavior, Your Honor. It's paranoid, secretive, and suggests deeper psychological issues. A mentally healthy person in a loving marriage would share such news with their spouse. Mrs. Mitchell's first instinct was deception and concealment. Stevens sat down, looking satisfied. The arguments hung in the air, toxic and convincing. Judge Thornton turned to Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell, is it true you concealed $1.8 billion from your husband? Sarah stood slowly, her pregnant body awkward. Yes, Your Honor, but I had reasons. My husband has been financially and emotionally abusive for years. He isolated me, controlled me, monitored my spending and communication. I hid the Bitcoin because I knew if he found out, he would take it, control it, use it against me. Yes or no, please, Judge Thornton interrupted. Sarah's heart sank. Yes, Your Honor. For how long? 4 months. Judge Thornton made a note. And in those 4 months, did you consult with your husband about this discovery? Discuss it with him? Attempt to include him in decisions about this asset? No, Your Honor, because yes or no. No, Diane stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell was protecting a premarital asset from a spouse who had already demonstrated controlling behavior. She has documented evidence of financial abuse, isolation tactics, monitoring of her communications, which we'll hear at the appropriate time, Judge Thornton said. Right now, I'm addressing the immediate issue of custody and the welfare of the unborn child. Stevens stood again. Your Honor, we're not seeking permanent custody. That would be decided in the divorce proceedings. We're simply asking for temporary custody until Mrs. Mitchell undergoes a comprehensive psychological evaluation by a court-appointed psychiatrist to ensure she's mentally fit to parent. Given the upcoming birth and the unusual circumstances, we believe it's prudent to act now to protect this child from a potentially unstable environment. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. The courtroom was too hot, too small. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel focused on Judge Thornton's face, trying to read which way this would go. Diane fought back hard. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Mr. Mitchell is weaponizing the legal system to maintain control over his wife. Mrs. Mitchell is perfectly mentally sound. She's 8 months pregnant. She's been attending all her prenatal appointments. Dr. Rachel Morrison will testify that she's been an exemplary patient who shows no signs of mental instability. Does Dr. Morrison have psychiatric training? Stevens interrupted. She's an OBGYN, so no psychiatric expertise, whereas we can provide multiple experts who will testify that Mrs. Mitchell's behavior patterns are consistent with delusional thinking, paranoid personality disorder, and an inability to form healthy attachments. Judge Thornton held up her hand. Enough, Ms. Rodriguez, I understand your position. However, Mr. Stevens raises valid concerns. The concealment of substantial assets, regardless of motive, is unusual behavior. The elaborate steps taken to hide these assets suggest a level of premeditation that is concerning. Your Honor, I'm not making a determination about mental fitness, Judge Thornton continued. That's precisely why a professional evaluation is necessary. Given the unusual circumstances, the substantial sums involved, the admitted deception, and the impending birth, I believe an abundance of caution is warranted. Sarah felt the world tilting. No, this couldn't be happening. Therefore, Judge Thornton said, and Sarah heard her daughter's fate in those words, I'm granting temporary custody to Mr. Mitchell until Mrs. Mitchell completes a comprehensive psychological evaluation by a court-appointed psychiatrist. Dr. William Jennings will conduct the evaluation. This order takes effect upon the birth of the child. The gavel came down. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. No, Sarah heard herself say. No, you can't. She's not even born yet. Mrs. Mitchell, Judge Thornton said, her voice not unkind but firm, this is a temporary measure. Complete the evaluation, demonstrate your mental fitness, and custody will be revisited. The evaluation must be completed within 14 days of birth. Court adjourned. Another gavel strike. Final. Sarah couldn't breathe. The room spun. Diane grabbed her arm, steadying her. We'll appeal, Diane said urgently. This isn't over. We'll get this overturned. She's not even born yet. Sarah's voice broke. How can he get custody of a baby who hasn't been born? It's temporary, Diane repeated, but she looked shaken too. You'll do the evaluation, you'll pass, and we'll get custody back. This is just Derek being vindictive. The judge erred on the side of caution, but we'll fix this. She's not even born yet, Sarah said again. Her brain couldn't process beyond that fact. What happens when I give birth? Derek just takes her from the hospital? Diane's silence was answer enough. Sarah collapsed into a chair, hand over her mouth, trying not to scream or cry or vomit. Across the courtroom, Derek was shaking hands with his lawyer, looking satisfied. He glanced at Sarah, and for just a moment, she saw triumph in his eyes. He'd won the first battle, and he knew it. This was Sarah's first crushing defeat, the moment when she truly realized she might lose her baby. All the money in the world couldn't protect her from a system that defaulted to caution, that saw a woman who'd hidden billions and decided she was unstable rather than smart. I need air, Sarah managed. She stood, moved toward the exit. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca was waiting. She'd wanted to attend the hearing, but Diane thought it was better to limit the number of people involved, to keep things professional. How did it go? Rebecca asked, then saw Sarah's face. Oh no, Sarah told her. Rebecca's expression went from shock to rage. He gets to take Hope? Your baby? That's insane. It's temporary, Sarah said numbly. I do a psych evaluation, prove I'm sane, get custody back. You are sane. You're the sanest person I know. You found $1 billion and had the intelligence to protect it from an abusive husband. That's not crazy, that's smart. Tell that to Judge Thornton. They sat on the courthouse steps, Sarah's pregnant body making the hard concrete even more uncomfortable. People walked past, lawyers and defendants and witnesses, all dealing with their own legal dramas. Sarah felt disconnected from it all, floating above her own life, watching herself fall apart from a distance. What if I don't pass the evaluation? Sarah asked quietly. What if they decide I'm actually unstable? What if Derek wins? He won't, Rebecca said fiercely. You're going to pass that evaluation with flying colors. Then we're going to get custody back. Then we're going to destroy him in divorce court. We're going to take everything he has and make sure he never hurts anyone again. Sarah wanted to believe her, but doubt had taken root. Derek had outmaneuvered her in court. What else was he planning? That afternoon in Diane's office, they regrouped and strategized. The office was in a converted brownstone in Back Bay, tastefully decorated with modern art and bookcases full of legal texts. Diane had coffee and water ready. She looked grim but determined. How did this happen? Sarah asked. I thought we had a strong case. I thought showing the abuse, the control, would matter. It will matter, Diane said, in the divorce proceedings, but this was an emergency custody hearing, focused solely on immediate risk to the child. Judge Thornton saw a hid $1 billion in pregnant woman and made the most conservative call possible. So what now? Now you do the evaluation. Dr. Jennings is actually a good choice. He's fair, thorough, not easily swayed by wealth or status. You'll meet with him, answer his questions honestly, complete whatever assessments he requires. You'll pass because you're perfectly sane. Then we file for immediate custody reversal. And if Derek fights that, he will fight it, Diane said. But we'll have a psychiatric evaluation saying you're mentally fit. That's powerful evidence. Judge Thornton will have to reconsider. How long will all this take? 2 weeks for the evaluation, another week or two for the custody reversal hearing. So about a month total, maybe 6 weeks if Derek really drags his feet. A month of Derek having custody of her newborn daughter. 6 weeks of supervised visitations, of Hope bonding with her father while Sarah was kept at arm's length. It felt unbearable. I can't do this, Sarah said. I can't lose her for even a day. You won't lose her, Diane said firmly. You'll have supervised visitation during this period. You can still breastfeed, still bond with her. It's not ideal, but it's manageable. And Sarah, this is Derek's last stand. Once you pass that evaluation, he's done. He'll have no ammunition left. We'll have proof you're mentally stable, and then the divorce becomes about his abuse, his control, his affair. We'll destroy him. Sarah wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. What about the Bitcoin, Sarah asked. Can he freeze it? Take it? He's already filed motions to freeze your assets as marital property, Diane said. But I've got that covered. I've filed counter motions showing it's premarital, separate property. That fight will take months, maybe years. But your offshore accounts are safe. The Bitcoin in Swiss custody is untouchable. Even if he somehow wins on the American accounts, you still have access to about 900 million. 900 million, a fortune most people couldn't imagine. And yet, in this moment, it felt worthless. Because it couldn't protect Hope. It couldn't prevent Derek from taking her daughter. Sarah left Diane's office feeling hollow. Rebecca drove her back to the hotel suite they'd rented. Sarah had moved out of the brownstone immediately after telling Derek about the Bitcoin, knowing she couldn't stay there another night. The suite was nice, expensive, impersonal. Not a home, just a temporary space while Sarah figured out what her life would look like now. That night, Sarah lay in bed, unable to sleep. Hope kicked constantly, as if sensing her mother's distress. Sarah put her hand on her belly, trying to communicate comfort she didn't feel. I won't let him take you, Sarah whispered into the darkness. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. The evaluation, the appeals, whatever. You're mine, Hope, not his. He doesn't get to win. But the promise felt hollow, because Derek had already won the first round, and Sarah had no idea what other tactics he might employ. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Derek and Vanessa were already planning their next move. And it would be far worse than a custody battle. It would be a trap designed to destroy Sarah completely, and she would walk right into it. 1 week after the crushing custody hearing, Sarah sat in Dr. William Jennings' office for her fifth and final evaluation session. Dr. Jennings was exactly what Sarah had hoped for: professional, kind, clearly intelligent, and seemingly immune to bias or manipulation. He was in his early 60s with a gentle manner that put people at ease and a sharp mind that missed nothing. The evaluation had been comprehensive: cognitive tests, personality assessments, Rorschach ink blots, and Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory questionnaires. Hours of interviews about her childhood, her marriage, her decision to hide the Bitcoin. Dr. Jennings had asked probing questions, but never judgmental ones. "Tell me about your relationship with your parents," he'd asked on day one. "Normal, loving. They were working class. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a teacher. They saved everything they had to send me to MIT. They died in a car accident 3 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. How did that affect you?" It was devastating, but Derek was supportive then. That was before everything changed. When did things change? After the miscarriage. That's when the control started. They talked extensively about the miscarriage, about Derek's shift from supportive to controlling, about the gradual erosion of Sarah's independence. "Why didn't you leave earlier?" Dr. Jennings had asked. "Before you found the Bitcoin." "Where would I go? I had no money, no job, no support system. He'd isolated me completely. And I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was what marriage was supposed to look like." "Do you still think that?" "No, I know now it was abuse, but it took finding the Bitcoin to give me the courage to admit it." Richie, some might say hiding the Bitcoin was paranoid behavior. Some might say it was survival. Dr. Jennings had smiled at that. Indeed. Now on the final day, Dr. Jennings looked up from his notes. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've completed my evaluation. I'll be submitting my report to Judge Thornton tomorrow, but I thought you might like to hear my conclusions in person." Sarah's heart pounded. Everything depended on this. "Yes, please." "In my professional opinion," Dr. Jennings said, "you exhibit no signs of mental illness, personality disorder, or psychological instability. Your decision to conceal assets from a controlling spouse was rational self-protection, not paranoia. Your elaborate security measures around the Bitcoin demonstrate intelligence and foresight, not delusional thinking." Sarah felt tears forming. "Really?" "Really. In fact, I'd say you're one of the most mentally sound people I've assessed in my 30-year career. You recognize an abusive dynamic. You strategized an escape. You protected your resources. That's not mental illness. That's survival. And that's exactly what a good mother should do: protect herself and her child." "Thank you," Sarah managed. "Thank you so much." "I'm recommending immediate restoration of custody rights," Dr. Jennings continued. "There's no legitimate reason for Mr. Mitchell to maintain temporary custody. You're fully capable of parenting. More than capable, actually. I'll be putting all of this in my official report." Sarah left Dr. Jennings' office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Rebecca was waiting in the car, and when Sarah told her the news, they both cried happy tears. "We did it," Rebecca said. "You did it. Derek's done." 2 days later, they were back in Judge Thornton's courtroom. This time, the hearing was brief. Dr. Jennings' report was entered into evidence. Derek's lawyer tried to object, tried to suggest they needed a second opinion, but Judge Thornton shut that down. "Dr. Jennings is a court-appointed expert and with an impeccable reputation," she said. "His evaluation is thorough and conclusive. Mrs. Mitchell shows no signs of mental instability. The temporary custody order is vacated. Full custody rights restored to Mrs. Mitchell pending final divorce proceedings." The gavel came down. Sarah felt joy surge through her. Outside the courthouse, Sarah and Rebecca hugged. Diane looked satisfied. "This is good," Diane said. "Really good. Derek's lost his leverage. Now we move forward with the divorce on our terms." Sarah put her hand on her belly. 3 weeks until her due date. 3 weeks until she'd meet Hope. And now she'd get to bring her daughter home. No Derek interference, no custody battles. For 1 week, Sarah felt safe. She moved into a beautiful hotel suite at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. She hired 24/7 security. She prepared the nursery in the second bedroom with Rebecca's help. She attended prenatal appointments where Dr. Morrison confirmed everything looked perfect. Sarah even let herself imagine the future. A brownstone of her own, maybe in Beacon Hill, starting the Hope Foundation to help other women escape abuse, raising her daughter in freedom and safety, maybe eventually dating Marcus Brennan, her old MIT friend who'd reached out when he'd heard about the divorce. Just coffee at first, nothing serious, just rebuilding her life piece by piece. It felt possible. It felt real. Then came the settlement offer. Diane called Sarah one evening, sounding cautiously optimistic. Derek's lawyer reached out. They want to settle, avoid months of court battles, public testimony, all the ugliness. What kind of settlement? Derek drops all custody claims, all marital property claims, everything. He walks away forever. You never see him again. Clean break. In exchange for what? $50 million. Sarah laughed. $50 million, that's nothing. That's less than 3% of my net worth. Exactly, which is why I think you should take it. You think I should pay him? I think you should pay for peace, Diane said. $50 million gets him out of your life. No more court battles, no more custody fights, no more tracking devices and baby blankets. You can raise Hope without looking over your shoulder. That's worth $50 million, Sarah. Sarah considered this. $50 million was a lot of money to most people. To her, it was a rounding error. And if it meant Derek disappeared completely, never contested custody, never caused problems. How do I know he'll actually stay away? Sarah asked. It'll be in the settlement. Legal contract. If he violates it, he faces contempt charges and has to return the money plus penalties. It's ironclad. My team will make sure of that. Sarah looked around her hotel suite, at the nursery setup, at the baby clothes waiting, at the life she was trying to build. Okay, she said finally, I'll pay him to go away. 3 days later, the papers were signed. Sarah authorized a transfer of $50 million from one of her Bitcoin accounts to Derek's company account. The settlement was finalized. Derek signed away all rights, all claims. It was done. For 24 hours, Sarah felt genuine relief. She'd bought her freedom. She'd bought Hope's safety. $50 million was cheap at the price. She slept through the night for the first time in months. Then came the knock on her hotel suite door at 6 in the morning. Sarah woke up groggy, confused. Hope had been kicking all night, keeping her half awake. She glanced at the clock, 6:15 a.m. Who would be knocking this early? Rebecca? She called out. Her sister was staying in the adjoining suite, connected by an internal door. The knocking became pounding. FBI, open up! Sarah's blood froze. FBI, what? Hold on, she called. She struggled out of bed, 8 months pregnant and moving slowly. She grabbed a robe, made her way to the door. Through the peephole, she saw men in FBI windbreakers. Her heart pounded. She opened the door. Sarah Mitchell? One of the agents asked. Yes? I'm Special Agent Torres with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. He pulled out handcuffs. What? Sarah's mind reeled. There's been a mistake. I haven't done anything. You have the right to remain silent. Agent Torres began reciting Miranda rights, while another agent cuffed her hands. Rebecca appeared from the connecting door, sleep-tousled and confused. What's happening? Ma'am, please step back, an agent said. Sarah, Rebecca shouted. The $50 million you transferred to Derek Mitchell's company 3 days ago has been flagged as proceeds of securities fraud, Agent Torres said. Our investigation shows you were a silent partner in Mitchell Tech Enterprises. You're being charged as a co-conspirator in a multi-year Ponzi scheme that defrauded investors of over $40 million. I was never part of his company, Sarah protested. I don't even know what his company does. This is insane. Tell it to the judge. We have emails, financial records, all showing your involvement dating back 2 years. Those have to be fake. He set me up. But they weren't listening. They were reading her rights, explaining the charges, treating her like a criminal. Then child services arrived, a woman in a blazer carrying a clipboard, looking tired and professional. I'm Sandra Walsh with Massachusetts Child Services. We're taking temporary custody of any minor children until these criminal charges are resolved. I'm not born yet, Sarah said desperately. We're aware. Until the infant is born and these charges are resolved, she'll be placed in foster care or with relatives. Rebecca stepped forward. I'm her sister. I'll take her. Are you a relative of the infant? I'm the aunt. We'll need to verify that and process paperwork. You'll need to come with us. They were leading Sarah away in handcuffs. She was 8 months pregnant, wearing a bathrobe, being arrested by the FBI while Child Services prepared to take her baby. Rebecca, Sarah shouted. Call Diane. Call her right now. I will, Rebecca promised, her face pale with shock. They took Sarah to the FBI field office. Interrogation room, metal table, harsh lighting. Everything from crime shows, except this was real and happening to her. Agent Torres sat across from her, another agent beside him. They slid documents across the table. Mrs. Mitchell, you can make this easier on yourself. Tell us about your role in Mitchell Tech's operations. I had no role, Sarah insisted. I was never involved in Derek's business. I didn't even know what his company did. These emails say otherwise. Sarah read the printed emails. Messages between her email address and Derek's discussing investment strategies, covering quarterly losses, keeping investors happy with false returns, all dated over the past 2 years, all signed with her name. I never sent these, Sarah said. These are fake. Derek had access to my email. He monitored everything. He must have created these using my account. So your husband framed you? Yes, he's retaliating because I filed for divorce, because I wouldn't give him half my Bitcoin. Agent Torres and his partner exchanged glances. The look clearly said, sure, lady, your husband framed you for fraud because you're a secret billionaire. They'd heard every excuse. Mrs. Mitchell, you understand how this looks? You hidden billion-dollar fortune, you refuse to share it, your husband's company turns out to be fraudulent, and suddenly there's evidence you were involved. That's not a frame-up. That's motive. Because I have $1.8 billion in Bitcoin and he wants it, Sarah said desperately. Don't you see this is exactly what he planned? The $50 million settlement was a trap. He routed it through fraudulent accounts so you'd think I was part of his scheme. He created fake emails to make me look guilty. When you freeze my Bitcoin as proceeds of crime, I can't afford lawyers, can't fight back, and he gets custody of our daughter and uses her as leverage to force me to give him the Bitcoin. The agents stared at her. She could see them thinking she sounded paranoid, crazy, exactly how Derek wanted her to sound. Mrs. Mitchell, Agent Torres said slowly, we're freezing all your assets pending investigation. That includes your Bitcoin wallets, your bank accounts, everything. Those funds may be proceeds of or instruments in criminal activity. You can't do that. We can and we are. You're entitled to a public defender if you can't afford private counsel. A public defender against this, against Derek's plan, against charges that could send her to prison for decades. Sarah started laughing, hysterical laughter that turned into crying, because she finally understood. Derek hadn't been planning to take her money through divorce court. He'd been planning to frame her for his crimes, freeze all her assets, take custody of Hope, and use their daughter as leverage to force Sarah to give him the Bitcoin to make the charges go away. It was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. Where's my baby? Sarah asked through her tears. Where's Hope? Child Services has temporary custody. She'll be placed with your sister, pending resolution of these charges. So when I give birth, they just take her? I don't even get to keep her? Agent Torres's expression softened slightly. That's up to Child Services and the courts. But yes, given the circumstances, it's unlikely you'll be granted custody while facing federal charges. Sarah put her head on the table. This was the third crushing moment. She'd lost her baby, her freedom, and all her money. Derek had maneuvered her into exactly the position he wanted her in. Powerless, or so he thought. Because Derek had made one critical mistake. When Sarah had split her Bitcoin 4 months ago, she hadn't put everything in American accounts. She'd created multiple wallets across multiple jurisdictions. The FBI could freeze her American accounts. That was about half her fortune, roughly $900 million. But they didn't know about the Swiss accounts, the Cayman Island holdings, the cold wallets and safety deposit boxes in London, Singapore, and Dubai. They didn't know she'd already moved half her fortune offshore, untouchable by U.S. law enforcement. Derek didn't know either. Sarah still had $900 million that nobody could freeze, nobody could seize, nobody could touch. That night in her cell at the Federal Detention Center, they denied bail, calling her a flight risk given her resources. Sarah stopped crying. She'd hit bottom. There was nowhere lower to fall, which meant there was only one direction left: up. Sarah sat on the narrow bunk, put her hands on her belly, where hope was kicking frantically, and made a decision. No more defense. No more reacting to Derek's moves. No more playing by rules designed to protect him. It was time to go on offense. Time to use every resource she had. Time to show Derek Mitchell what happened when you pushed a billionaire into a corner. Time for war. And this time, Sarah was bringing a nuclear option. In the Federal Detention Center holding cell, Sarah Mitchell sat alone on a concrete bunk at 2 a.m. Orange jumpsuit, no makeup, no phone, no hope. For hours, she'd cried until there were no tears left. She'd raged silently, pounding her fists against her thighs until they bruised. She'd spiraled into despair so deep she couldn't see light anywhere. But then, as the clock ticked toward 3 a.m., something shifted. Sarah remembered a conversation with her father years ago, back when she'd been struggling with a particularly difficult computer science problem at MIT. Grace, he'd said. He'd always called her Grace, her middle name, his pet name for her. When you can't solve a problem head on, you change the angle. You find the vulnerability your opponent doesn't know they have. Derek thought he'd won. He'd frozen her American accounts, framed her for fraud, positioned himself to take hope and use her as leverage. He'd played the game brilliantly. But he'd made assumptions, fatal assumptions. He assumed Sarah had put all her Bitcoin in American accounts. He assumed she'd been naive about asset protection. He assumed that freezing her visible wealth would leave her powerless. Derek had forgotten who he'd married. MIT graduate, computer science expert, a woman smart enough to buy Bitcoin in 2011 and smart enough to protect it properly when she found it. Sarah stood up from the bunk, wiped her face. In the dim light of the cell, she became someone different, harder, colder, done with fear. When she'd split her Bitcoin 4 months ago, she'd been thorough, paranoid even. She'd created 6 separate wallet clusters. 3 in American exchanges and banks, those were frozen now. 3 offshore in Swiss banks, Cayman Island trusts, and cold storage wallets and safety deposit boxes across 3 continents. The FBI had frozen approximately $900 million. She still controlled $900 million they didn't know about. More than enough to hire an army of lawyers, investigators, and forensic accountants. More than enough to destroy Derek Mitchell. At 8 a.m., when Diane Rodriguez arrived for their consultation in the detention center's attorney meeting room, she found a different Sarah waiting. "I need you to make some calls," Sarah said without preamble. "Sarah, listen, we can fight this. The evidence is circumstantial. Those emails can be proven fake if we get digital forensics. I have $900 million the FBI doesn't know about." Diane stopped mid-sentence, stared. "What?" "Offshore accounts, Swiss banks, cold storage. I split everything when I first found the Bitcoin. The feds froze half. I still control half." "That's," Diane sat down slowly, "that's incredible. Call this number." Sarah recited from memory a Swiss bank account number and access code. "Passcode is Phoenix Protocol. They'll wire $10 million to your firm within an hour. Use it. Hire the best forensic accountants in the country, the best digital investigators, whatever it costs. If we're caught moving money while you're under indictment, then I go to prison. But my daughter grows up knowing her mother fought, not knowing her mother surrendered." Diane studied her client. This wasn't the scared, pregnant woman from a week ago. This was someone else entirely. What changed? "I hit bottom," Sarah said simply. "Now I'm coming back up. And Derek Mitchell is going to learn what happens when you corner a woman with nothing left to lose and $900 million to spend. Okay, Diane said slowly. What else? I want Derek investigated, everything, his company finances, Vanessa's involvement, the Ponzi scheme structure. Find everything and bring it to me. I want to know exactly what he did and how he did it. That'll take time, 2 weeks minimum. Then we move fast. And Diane, get me bail. I don't care what it costs. I'm not giving birth in prison. Diane nodded. The hearing is this afternoon. I'll argue you're not a flight risk despite the frozen assets. It's a long shot, but make it work. Tell them I'll wear an ankle monitor, house arrest, whatever they want, but I'm not having my baby in a cell. After Diane left, Sarah had one more visitor. Rebecca, who'd been working with Child Services paperwork to get approved for temporary custody of Hope when she was born. They're saying I can take her, Rebecca said, looking exhausted, but only if you're convicted or incapacitated. Until then, she goes to foster care. No, Sarah said firmly, that's not happening. We're going to fix this before she's born. 3 weeks, Rebecca. I have 3 weeks to clear my name and destroy Derek before Hope arrives. How are you so calm? Because I'm done being scared. Derek wanted to break me. He broke the wrong version of me. The version that was afraid, that doubted herself, that believed his lies about her inadequacy. That woman is gone. What's left is someone who spent $900 on Bitcoin because a professor told her to bet on big ideas. That woman, she's dangerous. Rebecca smiled despite everything. There's my sister. I was wondering when she'd come back. The bail hearing that afternoon was tense. The prosecutor argued Sarah was an extreme flight risk with access to billions and motivation to flee. Diane countered that Sarah's assets were frozen, she was 8 months pregnant, and she had deep ties to Boston. Your Honor, Diane said, my client couldn't flee if she wanted to. She's about to give birth. She wants to be here for her daughter. She's willing to accept any conditions. Ankle monitoring, house arrest, daily check-ins. She's not running. The judge, a different one, thankfully, not Judge Thornton, set bail at $10 million. Paid within the hour, Diane said after the hearing, from your Swiss accounts. Good, get me out of here. By 6 p.m., Sarah was free. Ankle monitor attached, house arrest at a new hotel suite with 24/7 FBI surveillance, but free. She could prepare for Hope's birth. She could fight back. And the investigation Diane had commissioned was already beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, as Sarah waited for Hope's arrival and prepared for battle, the forensic team uncovered everything. Derek's company, Mitchell Tech Enterprises, had been bankrupt for 3 years. He'd been running a classic Ponzi scheme, paying early investors with money from new investors, while siphoning millions into personal accounts. Vanessa Price wasn't just his mistress. She was his co-conspirator and CFO. She created the entire fraud structure, cooked the books, and hidden $47 million in stolen investor funds. She'd been planning to flee to the Cayman Islands with $12 million in a personal offshore account. The emails framing Sarah were fabricated using admin access to her old email account. The metadata showed they'd been created after the fact, backdated, all sent from IP addresses traced to Derek's office. The $50 million settlement payment had been deliberately routed through the fraudulent company accounts. Derek had tipped off the SEC, then pointed them at Sarah. The perfect frame. It's all here, Diane said, spreading documents across Sarah's hotel suite desk. Everything we need to clear you and bury him. Then let's bury him, Sarah said. She was 8 months, 3 weeks pregnant. Hope could arrive any day. But first, Sarah had one more move to make. The sting operation. Special Agent Torres sat across from Sarah in his FBI office, reviewing the evidence her forensic team had compiled. His expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and grudging respect. This is solid, he admitted. The metadata, the IP traces, the timeline inconsistencies. Mitchell fabricated those emails. So you believe me now? Sarah asked. I believe you were framed, but I need more than this. I need a confession. Without that, a good defense lawyer could still create reasonable doubt. Say you helped create the evidence against yourself to cover your involvement. What if I can get you a confession? On tape. Torres studied her. You want to wear a wire? Derek thinks I'm broken, desperate. He'll want to gloat, to tell me exactly how he destroyed me. Men like him always do. Torres considered this. If you get a confession, full immunity, all charges dropped. But if this goes wrong, it won't, Sarah said. Her hand went to her belly. Hope kicked, as if agreeing with her mother. Trust me, I know exactly what Derek wants to hear. 2 days later, Sarah sat alone in a private dining room at an upscale restaurant in downtown Boston. She'd texted Derek a simple message. We need to talk. Just us. I have a proposal. He'd agreed immediately, confident, certain of his victory. Sarah wore the FBI wire under her maternity dress. Her hands were steady as she waited. She'd rehearsed this. She knew exactly how to play this. Derek entered, looking satisfied, pleased with himself. He'd won, or thought he had, and Sarah could see it in his walk, his smile, his casual confidence. Sarah, he said, sitting across from her, you look rough. Prison jumpsuit doesn't suit you. I want to make a deal, Sarah said. She let her voice shake. Let him see manufactured desperation. Please, Derek, I'm begging you. I'm listening. Drop the charges. Get the FBI to back off. Give me custody of Hope when she's born. I'll give you $100 million. Derek laughed, actually laughed. 100 million? Sarah, that's insulting. You have 1.8 billion and you're offering me 100 million? It's all I can access, the rest is frozen. Try again. Sarah let tears form. Then what do you want? Please, I'll give you anything, just don't take my baby. Derek leaned forward, enjoying this. Half, 900 million. You give me half the Bitcoin, you publicly admit you're an unfit mother and sign over full custody, and then I make the charges disappear. I'm not an unfit mother. Really? Derek's smile was cruel. Because you're under federal indictment. You hid billions from your husband. You went to prison. Courts will see it exactly how I tell them to see it. Sarah played her role perfectly. You set me up. Those fake emails. I never had anything to do with your company. This was the moment, the trap. Derek couldn't resist. He laughed. Not a small laugh. A genuine, delighted laugh. Of course you didn't. That was the whole point. Vanessa's idea, actually. Brilliant woman. Brilliant. We needed a scapegoat when the SEC started asking questions about the quarterly returns. Who better than my secretive, paranoid wife with her mysterious billions? Got you, Sarah thought. Keep going. Why? She asked. You had 12 million. Why steal more? Derek spread his hands, proud of himself. Had. Past tense. I've been broke for 2 years, Sarah. The company's been a shell. Fake returns to investors. Robbing Peter to pay Paul. Classic Ponzi scheme. I needed your Bitcoin to cover the shortfall and set myself up properly. And when you wouldn't just give it to me like a good little wife should, he shrugged. This was plan B. Frame you for my crimes, freeze your assets, take custody of Hope, then use her as leverage. You give me half the Bitcoin to get your daughter back and make the charges disappear. Clean, simple, effective. And Vanessa gets her cut, 450 million. We disappear to the Cayman Islands where there's no extradition. You keep Hope and your remaining money. I keep mine and my freedom. Everyone wins. Except me, Sarah said quietly. Derek smiled. Well, yes, except you. But that's what you get for thinking you could outsmart me. I'm Derek Mitchell. I built a $12 million company. I don't lose to anyone, especially not to some nobody coder I elevated out of pity. Perfect. Everything on tape, every admission, every detail. The doors burst open. FBI agents flooded the room. Agent Torres led them, badge out. Derek Mitchell, you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and approximately 12 other federal charges. Derek's face went from satisfied to shocked to enraged in seconds. He looked at Sarah, saw her pull the wire from under her dress. You wore a wire? His voice was strangled. You set me up? Sarah stood, calm and cold. Every word recorded, every admission documented. You taught me how to survive, you, Derek. Now I'm teaching you what happens when you underestimate me. You bitch? No, Sarah said as they handcuffed him. I'm the woman who destroyed you. There's a difference, Baum. They dragged Derek away, still screaming threats. The door closed. Silence. Agent Torres approached Sarah. That was good work, Mrs. Mitchell. Just get me my daughter back, Sarah said. All charges dropped. Full immunity. You're clear. I'll contact Child Services immediately. Sarah walked out of the restaurant into the Boston evening. Rebecca was waiting in the car. Sarah got in, leaned back, closed her eyes. It's done, she said. Derek? Arrested. Confessed to everything. Vanessa too, they're raiding her apartment right now. Rebecca started the car. You did it? You actually did it. We did it, Sarah corrected. You, me, Diane. We survived him. What now? Sarah put her hand on her belly. Hope kicked, strong and insistent. Now we wait for her to arrive. And then we build the life we deserve. 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, Sarah's water broke. The contractions started mild, almost gentle, then built to crescendos of pain that took Sarah's breath away. Rebecca drove her to Massachusetts General Hospital, running red lights, both of them terrified and excited and overwhelmed. You're doing great, Rebecca kept saying. Just breathe. We're almost there. They arrived at 2:45 a.m. The nursing staff took over immediately. Wheelchair, elevator, labor and delivery floor. Everything happened fast and slow simultaneously, time becoming elastic and strange. Dr. Rachel Morrison arrived at 3 a.m., professional and reassuring. Okay, Sarah, let's meet this baby girl. Labor was brutal. 5 hours of pain, of breathing exercises, of Rebecca holding her hand and murmuring encouragement, of nurses checking monitors, and Dr. Morrison examining progress. At 7:47 in the morning, as sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, Sarah gave birth to a perfect baby girl. Congratulations, Dr. Morrison said, placing the tiny infant on Sarah's chest. She's beautiful. Sarah looked down at her daughter and felt her heart explode. Hope had dark hair, blue eyes, perfect tiny fingers that wrapped around Sarah's thumb with surprising strength. Hi, baby, Sarah whispered. Hi, Hope. I'm your mama, and I'm going to protect you, I promise. Hope looked up at her mother with those unfocused newborn eyes, and Sarah felt a love so fierce it terrified her. This was what she'd been fighting for. This perfect, innocent little human who'd done nothing wrong but have the misfortune of Derek Mitchell as a father. But Hope would never know the Derek who tried to destroy Sarah. Hope would only know supervised visits, if Derek was even granted those after his conviction. Hope would grow up knowing her mother had fought for her, had refused to surrender, had loved her enough to go to war. She's perfect, Rebecca said, crying happy tears. Sarah, she's absolutely perfect. For 2 hours, Sarah held Hope skin to skin, feeding her, breathing in that newborn smell, memorizing every detail. Then a knock on the door. Sarah tensed. Who is it? A nurse entered, apologetic. Mrs. Mitchell, there's someone here. He says he's the father. He has a court order for visitation. Sarah's blood went cold. Derek? He's in jail awaiting trial. How? Posted bail an hour ago, Diane said, entering behind the nurse. I just heard. He posted $5 million and got released pending trial. And technically, he still has parental rights until the criminal trial concludes. No, Sarah said, holding Hope tighter. He's not touching her. He tried to frame me. He plotted to take her. He doesn't get to hold her. Wah, Sarah, Diane said gently. The court order supersedes personal feelings. It's supervised visitation only. 10 minutes. That's it. Derek entered with a court officer and his lawyer. His face was haggard. He'd been in FBI custody for 3 days. But his eyes softened when he saw Hope. Sarah, he said, congratulations. Get out. 10 minutes supervised visitation, Mrs. Mitchell, the court officer said. That's the law. Sarah had no choice. Trembling with rage and fear, she handed Hope to Derek. For 10 minutes, Derek held his daughter, and Sarah watched something unexpected happen. His face transformed. The calculation, the cruelty, the narcissism, all of it melted away. For just those 10 minutes, he looked like an actual father. Like maybe there was humanity buried under the monster. "Hi, Hope," Derek whispered. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your daddy. I'm sorry for everything. I'm so sorry." Was he talking to Hope or to Sarah? Sarah couldn't tell. Then the 10 minutes were up. Derek handed Hope back carefully, gently. "She's beautiful," Derek said to Sarah. "You did good." "Leave," Sarah said. Derek left without argument. But as he passed Rebecca, he did something strange. He slipped a piece of paper into her hand. After he was gone, Rebecca unfolded the paper. A note in Derek's handwriting. "Check the blanket." "What does that mean?" Rebecca asked. Sarah lifted Hope's pink hospital blanket. Sewn into the hem, barely visible, was a tiny GPS tracking device. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. Diane grabbed it, examined it. He planted a tracker. Even now, even after everything, he's still trying to control, to monitor, to know where you are. They destroyed the device immediately, but the message was clear. Derek would never stop. Even facing federal charges, even looking at years in prison, he couldn't let go of his need for control. This was Sarah's reminder that the war wasn't over. Derek was free on bail. The trial could take months. Until he was convicted and imprisoned, he remained a threat. "We need better security," Sarah said. 24/7 protection. "He's desperate now. Desperate people do desperate things." "Already arranged," Diane said. "Private security firm, former Secret Service agents. They start tonight." Sarah looked down at Hope, sleeping peacefully despite the drama. "I'm not letting him anywhere near her again. Supervised visitation or not. I'll fight every court order, every motion, every attempt. He forfeited his right to be a father when he tried to frame me." "The criminal trial starts in 2 months," Diane said. "Until then, we fight. And Sarah, we're going to win." 2.5 months later, federal court in downtown Boston became the stage for United States versus Derek Mitchell and Vanessa Price. The trial was everything Diane had promised. A media circus, a spectacle, a public reckoning. Sarah attended every day, Hope with her nanny in a nearby hotel room. She wanted Derek to see her, to see what he'd lost, to understand that she'd won. The prosecution's case was devastating. They had the wire recording of Derek's confession. They had forensic evidence of the Ponzi scheme. They had testimony from defrauded investors who'd lost everything. They had Vanessa's offshore accounts, Derek's fake emails, the whole sordid scheme laid bare. Derek's lawyer tried to claim entrapment, that Sarah had manipulated Derek into confessing, but the judge shut that down. Mr. Mitchell confessed voluntarily to crimes he actually committed. That's not entrapment. That's justice. Vanessa turned on Derek to save herself. She testified that Derek had masterminded everything, that she'd just followed orders, that she'd been manipulated by a powerful man. Her testimony destroyed whatever defense Derek had left. Derek tried to testify in his own defense, to paint himself as the victim of a crazy, vindictive wife. But under cross-examination, he fell apart. The prosecutor played the wire recording, Derek's own voice, smug and proud, admitting to everything. "I've been broke for 2 years. The company's been a shell. I needed your Bitcoin to cover it. Frame you, freeze your assets, take custody of Hope." Clean, simple, effective. The jury's expression said everything. Disgust, anger. They'd made up their minds. But the moment that mattered most, the moment Sarah had been waiting for, came when she took the stand. "Mrs. Mitchell," Diane asked, "why did you hide the Bitcoin from your husband?" Sarah looked directly at the jury, at 12 ordinary people who would decide Derek's fate. "Because Derek Mitchell spent 5 years making me feel worthless. He told me I didn't understand money. He gave me an allowance. He monitored my phone, my email, my location. He isolated me from friends. He controlled every aspect of my life and told me it was love." She turned to look at Derek. But it wasn't love. It was abuse. Financial abuse, emotional abuse. "And I hid the Bitcoin because I knew if he found out, he'd take it, control it, use it against me." And I was right. Derek stared at his hands. "The Bitcoin was mine before I met him," Sarah continued. "I owed him nothing. I hid it to survive. And when I finally tried to leave, he proved exactly why it had been right to hide it. He tried to steal it through fraud. He tried to frame me for his crimes. He tried to take my daughter and use her as leverage. Her voice broke slightly. I'm not the criminal here. I'm the woman who had the audacity to have her own money. In Derek's world, that was unforgivable. The jury leaned forward, engaged. Several women nodded. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts, both Derek and Vanessa. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Morrison, ironically the same name as Sarah's OBGYN, though no relation, had a reputation for harsh sentences in fraud cases. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Morrison said, you defrauded investors of $47 million. You abused your wife financially and emotionally for years. You attempted to frame her for your crimes. You used your unborn daughter as a pawn. You've shown no remorse, only entitlement and anger at being caught. Derek stood motionless. I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. You will pay $47 million in restitution to defrauded investors and $10 million in damages to Mrs. Mitchell. All parental rights are terminated. You will have no contact with your daughter. The gavel came down. Final. Vanessa received 12 years for her role. She cried. No one sympathized. Outside the courthouse, Sarah held Hope, now 3 months old. Rebecca stood beside her. Diane looked satisfied. A reporter called out, Mrs. Mitchell, how do you feel? Sarah looked at Hope, then at the camera. I feel relief. Justice was served. But mostly, I'm just grateful to move forward with my daughter. What will you do with your fortune? Sarah smiled. Something good. Something that matters. She walked to her car and left. Free at last. Derek Mitchell was going to prison for 18 years. He'd lost everything. His freedom, his money, his daughter, his reputation. Sarah had won. Completely. Absolutely. But winning felt different than she'd imagined. Not triumphant, just quiet, just relief. That night, rocking Hope to sleep, Sarah whispered, your daddy made terrible choices, but you'll never have to deal with that. You're mine, Hope. And I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing your worth, knowing your power, knowing that no one gets to make you small. Hope slept peacefully. Sarah watched her daughter, this perfect, innocent creature, and felt purpose crystallize. She had $900 million left after legal fees and settlements, and she knew exactly what to do with it. 6 months after Derek's conviction, Sarah stood in Boston Public Library's Grand Hall before 200 people. Domestic violence advocates, politicians, survivors, journalists. They'd come to witness the launch of something unprecedented. The Hope Foundation, Sarah began, exists because I was lucky. I had resources when I needed them. Most women don't. She looked out at the crowd. Hope was with Rebecca in the front row, 6 months old now, babbling happily. 5 years ago, I let a man convince me I was worthless because I didn't have money. Turns out I had more money than he could imagine. But here's what I learned. Money didn't save me. Knowing my worth saved me. The room was silent, attentive. The Bitcoin was luck. $900 I could barely afford as a student, forgotten for 13 years. But recognizing I deserved better than abuse, that was choice. A choice available to every woman, whether you have $5 or $5 billion. Sarah outlined the foundation's mission. $200 million in initial funding, emergency funds for women leaving abuse, free legal services, safe housing, financial literacy education, childcare support, because no woman should have to stay in a cage, golden or otherwise. Standing ovation. People crying. Sarah cried too. My daughter is named Hope. I chose that name in my darkest moment, when I couldn't see a way forward. This foundation is my promise to her and every woman. Hope isn't just a feeling, it's a resource. And now we have $200 million worth of it. The applause was deafening. After the event, Sarah drove home to her new brownstone in Beacon Hill. $8 million, modest by her standards. She and Rebecca and Hope lived there together, chosen family. That night, Sarah rocked Hope to sleep, moonlight streaming through the nursery window. Your daddy is in prison, Sarah whispered. and part of me feels guilty. Part of me wonders if I could have saved him. Hope slept peacefully. But then I remember you can't fix someone who doesn't think they're broken, and you can't love someone into respecting you. So instead, I'll teach you something better. Know your worth, protect your resources, never let anyone make you small. She smiled. Oh, and maybe buy some Bitcoin. In her bedroom, Sarah checked her phone. Marcus Brennan had texted, saw the foundation launch, incredible. Coffee sometime? As friends. Sarah smiled, typed back, coffee sounds good. As friends, for now. She looked in the mirror. This woman was different from the one at the gala 9 months ago, stronger, free, powerful. A photo on her dresser showed Sarah and Hope, both smiling. Sarah had survived, she'd fought, she'd won, and now she was helping others do the same. The $900 she'd invested at 19 had become a fortune, but more importantly, she'd remembered her own worth. That transformation was priceless. Sometimes the smallest decisions create the biggest changes. Sometimes survival requires hiding your power until you're ready to use it. Sometimes the cage door is unlocked. You just need courage to turn the handle. Sarah had turned that handle. She'd walked out free, and now she was helping thousands of others do the same. Derek had tried to make her small. Instead, he'd awakened something dangerous. A woman who knew her worth. A woman with resources. A woman determined to change the world. The Bitcoin billionaire had been luck. But everything after, the fighting, the surviving, the winning, that had been choice. Her choice, and Sarah Mitchell was just getting started. 1 year later, at Hope's first birthday party, Sarah made a toast. To choices, to courage, to knowing your worth, and to hope. The feeling, the resource, and my perfect daughter. Everyone raised their glasses. Marcus stood beside Sarah now, tentatively official after months of careful dating. Rebecca had brought her new girlfriend. Diane was there with her wife. The Hope Foundation board members. Women the foundation had helped, now thriving. This was Sarah's family now. Chosen, earned, built from the ashes of her old life. Hope smashed cake into her face. Delighted. Everyone laughed. Sarah held her daughter close, breathing in that toddler smell of innocence and possibility. Derek was in year 1 of 18 in federal prison. Vanessa too. They'd both sent letters through lawyers requesting contact with Hope. Sarah had denied them. Hope would grow up knowing the truth, but only when she was old enough to understand it. For now, Hope would know only love, security, and the absolute certainty that she was valued for who she was. That night, after everyone left, Sarah rocked Hope to sleep one more time. We made it, she whispered. Both of us. We made it through. Hope's response was soft baby snores. Sarah smiled, turned on the mobile, and went to her own room. She looked at the photo, her and Hope both smiling, both free. The journey from victim to survivor to warrior had been brutal, but Sarah wouldn't change it, because that journey had brought her here, to this life, this purpose, this future. She'd started with nothing but $900 and a professor's advice to bet on big ideas. She'd ended with a fortune and a foundation, and a daughter and proof that even in the darkest cage, freedom is possible. You just have to be brave enough to turn the handle. Sarah had turned it, walked through, and the other side was beautiful.